Welcome to the Agency Navigators podcast. I'm Ro.
I'm Don.
I'm Cayla.
And you've got the core three yet again. Thanks for listening. As always, thank you for tuning in. We think we have a good topic this time. Would you say that the title's a little cringy? Was that the reaction?
I was going to say, it depends on what side of the spectrum you're going to fall on, whether it's a fun podcast or not. But I hope you at least get one piece of information that you can use out of it.
And we always do that. So today we are cutting the cord. When to cut ties with the producer. And don't even ask me how we came up with this name along the way, but it was a team effort.
There's some stories.
Yeah, there's some stories.
Some things prove to be almost universal. And we've now worked with so many agencies, we know where their patterns.
Mhm.
And almost every agency struggles with new producer hires. And when do we call it quits? When do we part ways? When do we say a new producer is not going to make it and we need to cut that investment? I see this as being one of the biggest challenges for owners often or sales managers, when to cut the cord with that producer.
Mm-hmm. And we're not even going to go ahead of this and when to not hire that producer, because all three of us have done interviews where that person shouldn't have been hired. We're not going there today. That's going to be a whole separate podcast someday. But let's go. We're going to dive right in. When to cut ties with the producer. This is something the three of us have a lot of experience with. And anything to add quick, Kay, before I jump into our outline here?
No, let's dive in.
All right. So first, because we did a bit meeting this morning to really dive deep into this topic, and we all got very passionate about it very quickly. And what really came out of it was there's three areas of the trap. There is a trap to thinking you cannot cut those ties. As an agency owner, we've seen so many of them fall into the trap. There's a tactical trap, an emotional trap, and then the organizational impact. So let's dive into the tactical, because that's really straightforward. I think each of us can take one of the real topic points. I'll kick off because this is the easy one that I came up with. You keep the producer because of existing client relationships. It's relationship driven. They're known in the community. They have a few, probably not many, but a few key accounts, and they're a warm body, and you just can't bring yourself to think about what it would be like not to have them. That's a tactical trap. Kay or Don?
Absolutely. It's the change. It's even though they may not have a lot of relationships, you still have to deal with the aftermath of what will you do? Will you reassign them, or the house accounts? We don't know them that well. Will they be loyal to the agency, or if we cut cord with the producer, will they follow the producer? All sorts of things.
I think if you've done any hiring in the past 2 years, whether it's, an assistant, it's a receptionist, it's producer, it's difficult. So there's also that tactical knowing of, I have to make this hire. I have to reach out to recruiters again. It's a lot of work. It's kind of like training for a marathon. There's a lot of work to do. So should we even start, or should we work with what we've got? So I think, part of that is it really worth the time and effort that I'm going to have to put in to replace this person?
Mm-hmm. And again, that's one of those tactical moments of how do you replace them? One, what do you do? What are you going to lose that by cutting them? The existing client, the community. Two, will the owners have to step in and take over the accounts? And three, how do you find the replacement? Which producers are unicorns. They are hard to find. We all know that. We've talked about it in our early podcasts. It is something that's really real. I want to touch on my CFOs here. What do we like to do with the accounts when a producer leaves?
Not reassign them. We want to make them house business, if at all possible. This comes up a lot. And from a CFO, we see this as an opportunity. Whenever a producer leaves, we want to re-examine those accounts. And if at all possible, it's important financially to make those house accounts.
It's an
Anything to
immediate
add?
positive reinforcement that you're doing the right thing. And two, this is going to be a difficult decision. At the end of the day, you're still retaining those accounts, hopefully. I'm going to preface by saying that if you have the right contract and agreement, those should be yours to keep and those go directly to house. So you already profit off of making a hard decision.
There you go. Good. Then when we were chatting this morning about this, we really we're not scripted. We love just to talk, but sometimes we'll kind of group and think about it. I think it was Kay, you brought out this segment, the emotional time. Am I correct in thinking, was that Kay or was that you?
Oh, I think we all
We all got there somehow.
We all got there. It's very emotional to make this
So
decision.
I'll be the non-emotional one here to start this off with. From a black and white dollars and cents perspective, oftentimes when we look into an agency, it's very clear, should the producer stay or the producer should go? Dollars and cents wise, it's very clear from a financial standpoint. But Cayla, from an emotional standpoint, it never seems to be that clear.
No, I'm going to take the logical into the emotional, and I'm going to apply enterprise risk management since we're all risk managers out there. The root cause question is asking why 5 times. So if you gave me every tactical, so if I said, why can't you let your producer go? And you gave me every tactical reason you could possibly think of. If I asked why 5 times for each of those reasons, they almost always lead back to an emotional decision. There's something emotional in there, right? You're having to turn someone away. You're having, someone who now has client relationships, employee relationships, a relationship with you if you're part of the sales team or the sales manager. It's a really hard to cut someone off the team, even if they are underperforming. It hurts. You either feel guilty, you're sad, you're already annoyed with the person, potentially. There's just so many different human emotions that are driving every reason why that sometimes it's not easy to take the path of, least resistance.
Very, very true. So let me give them a pop quiz, which we've never done before. So if you're an agency owner, manager, principal listening to this, and you have someone on the team, even if they're not a producer, think about these 4 questions and how many would you answer yes? The first one, well, you hired the person and it's going to be really tough to admit that it's a mistake. And how's it going to look that you advocated, you've been fighting for this person, and now you're letting them go? Yes or no? Do you think they've had enough training? Or maybe if you taught them a little more, or spent some more time with them, or went with them on the sales calls. How many times have you put this back on yourself or your training process? Yes or no? This one we've all heard. That you think the producer is going to change and they're going to come around and meet their goals. They have a family to support. They have a place in the community. They're going to keep this job. They know it's a good job. They're committed to the agency. They're going to come around and they're going to meet their goals. Yes or no? And finally, and this is the hard one, you're avoiding the discomfort of having the conversation. And we've all had these tough conversations. They're never easy. And you've got a bazillion things going on. There's fires. You have your own client book to service. You've got other employees. You have family pressures. You have industry pressures. The last thing you can think about is having the really, really hard conversation. Yes or no? And my advice, and that was not a planned pop quiz. It was even a pop quiz for me. Is if you said yes to any one of those 4, you really got to look at cutting the ties. Okay, what do you think?
Yeah, it's easy for us to tell you that, but part of, why we joke about it and what we've seen across the board, and we take the 30,000 foot view, and we'll get into this a little bit more here soon, is it's easy for us. We don't know the person, we don't know their history, we don't know their background. So this is one of those times I really urge you to put those things aside and really look at, is this person adding value to the agency? How much noise do they bring me? And consider how much of an impact they're having on everyone else around you. And, we can ask these questions, but it is coming from a caring place, for you and for the producer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A poor performing producer stresses the ownership, stresses management, stresses fellow team members, and ultimately, and maybe most importantly, that underperforming producer feels distressed themselves because chances are they're not a fit for that career. And therefore, from coming from a place of serving everybody well, sometimes the most human thing you can do is help that producer move on.
Mhm. So actually, let's jump ahead a little bit, because what we wanted to transition to is really talk about how agency CFO has stepped in for our clients, how we are critical to this whole decision-making process, because we have that different lens. What Cayla was just saying is we look at the outside. And to Don's point, our end game is always to do what's best for our agency partners. We take that fiduciary responsibility extremely seriously, and we understand the human impact on that person. But oftentimes we have conversations on what we call the graceful exit.
Absolutely. A underperforming producer serves no one well. And for the longer it goes, this is the worse it gets. Yes, nothing about this gets better for any party, whether it's ownership, management, team members,
The service,
clients.
you get the service team that's always upset with the sales team. Well, how often is it because there's a producer who shouldn't be a producer in place?
Nor this producer. The longer this goes, it gets worse for everyone. And that's why it's so important, because we know generally everybody understands a gut feeling within a week of a new producer joining an agency. 99% of the time, we have a clear gut reaction to whether this new team member is going to become a validated producer, is going to be successful, or not going to be successful.
Mhm.
And our gut is right 99% of the times, yet we question that.
Well, and to add to that, and Jay, I know you've done it. I said it at the top of the podcast. Kay's done interviews, Don's done interviews, I do interviews. Oftentimes for our agency partners, we will step in and be an outside interviewee. We will interviewer, that we will talk to these candidates, these interviewees, and give our outside opinion. We take it very seriously. Take our advice, because chances are we're seeing something that you're not.
And more often than not, we keep saying they're not a great producer. I'll take the other spin on it. Just because they're not a great producer doesn't mean they're not going to excel in any other part of their career. More often, I'm going to say more often than not, they are hard workers and they really do mean well. But if you're not in the right seat and you're really not the personality, the skill sets, the innate skills for a producer, you're naturally always going against the grain, and it's a really hard position to be in. So I always say, put yourself in their shoes. It's really tough to tell someone, hey, I signed up for this job and I don't think I'm performing well. That's not an easy conversation to have either, right? That's most likely not going to be the resolve. However, think about in your own careers, whether it was in early high school, all the way up to how you got to being an agency owner. Think of a job that you didn't necessarily love or you weren't the right fit for it. You clearly found your way, and it's why you've excelled as an agency owner. But imagine that person not finding that career yet. You're just holding them up at that point to not finding what they really love and will excel in. So it's just as much your duty to them to set them free to find a career that they can be happy with.
Love it. And the one way to do it is actually one of our tips for finding the right person, right seat. We know that book. We know that tagline's quoted all the time. Develop a profile of your ideal producer for your agency. We've talked about ideal client. There's ideal employees. We even, if you listen to the podcast that we've done with our friends at Delana Gibson, Chip talks about an ideal profile for an acquisition. Ideal profiles work for a reason because you know your agency. Stop and think about what partnerships, what people, what acquisitions, whatever it is, what is ideal for your agency. So with your ideal producer, what is their interview process? What's their onboarding? Do they present their business plan to you? Kay, I'm going to let you take the idea we talked about this morning, the assessments and tests.
And I think a big part of this, we keep saying producer, I probably should have taken a step back. When we say producer, we're talking about an outside producer. They hunt their own leads, they build their own network. They're essentially running their own mini business centers under your agency. So there are different caveats to this. If you have maybe a combined service salesperson, you have someone in just inside sales, there are different caveats to this where they need their own ideal profiles. So we're talking about someone who's out there really needing to build their own network and book a business. And that person should have an assessment. There are plenty of sales assessments out there, whether it's a version of DISC, there's Ideal Traits, there's Omnia, there's SPQ Gold, if you're familiar. There are so many different sales assessments out there. Pick and choose which one you like the best. But if you can build your ideal profile and the ideal assessment, it's a lot easier to have these hard conversations during the recruiting process before you have to onboard them, before you have to make that offer, and before you have to have the hard conversation.
There you go. So when you create that, absolutely, you create this whole package of the profile and how you're going to assess it and go from there. Then you look at your current producers. How do they fit? Are they really a fit for that ideal category you've created? If not, can they get there realistically? Because they have to want to change. And changing yourself is really hard. And then ultimately, if not, that may be your key to cut the cord. Other things you can do, producer playbooks.
Absolutely. Have a plan. The more that things are in black and white and measurable, where they are objective versus subjective, if we can say that, look, we needed to add 10 prospects to the pipeline and your new producers only brought in 2 for the month. Well, that's an objective measure. So I think sometimes we struggle because this feels very subjective. If you can have pure measurables, that will help you absolutely come to the right conclusion. Let the numbers speak for themselves.
And a lot of times these hard conversations just aren't, you're fired, sorry, we've got to go. It's not necessarily putting them on a performance plan. Sometimes it's just having a numbers conversation to say, here's where we expected you to be, let's say 3 years into this, a year into this, 6 months into it. Wherever you're feeling, timeline-wise that you should be having this, there should be metrics to hold against, right? Everyone should have a sales target. If they're not on that plan, it's not just, hey, we're letting you go. It's sometimes also letting them know that they're off of that plan. There are a few exceptions where a producer might actually come back with the right plan, the right prospects, and, they're back to validation, no problem. Sometimes it's just having that hard conversation. But I will always say, careful that not everyone is the exception. They are most likely within the norm. So
the norm.
Wow.
And then, Kay, you made me think of a really interesting point. This should not come as a surprise to the producer.
No.
If you have a playbook in place, if you have a compensation plan, which agency CFO, we have all of these tools. Our minds have already done this work for you.
And it's being communicated
to them.
And that's what the key is.
We've gotten on calls and gone over compensation plans and playbooks.
It's one thing to have the tools, but we have to communicate, at least monthly, I would say, if not more so often, to that new producer. Here's where you're tracking well, or here's where you're not tracking. Don't let it be a surprise.
It shouldn't be a surprise.
Part of graceful exits isn't just, here we go, your time is up. Sometimes it is transition plans too. So, also consider the kindness factor of this is if you're waiting for the right conversation or the right time to have the hard conversation, you can have a graceful exit and you can have a graceful transition plan out. You don't just have to let them go tomorrow. So also keep that in mind if that's what's holding you back. The idea is the closer we can get to cutting the cord, the better off our agency is going to be.
Absolutely. So, okay, again, you spot and just a train of thought. Don't do it in November right before Thanksgiving or Christmas. This should be something you're working on now. By the end of the first quarter, of a year, or at the very least midway through the second quarter, you should know if your producers are going to meet their goals. One, they should have goals. That's besides the point. And then, then third quarter is really the time, will they make it or not? So that they're set up so it's not November or December and you're saying, well, I can't get rid of them now. It's the holiday season. This is something should be an ongoing conversation. Use your tools, use your planning, get them involved, help them to find that next great chapter if it's not going to work. Where can they go based on their profile? What should they be doing? Because ultimately, don't let them speak in premium. Please don't let them speak in premium. They need to speak in revenue. Why, guys?
Absolutely. It just inflates. There's really a thought process. If you talk about $1 million producer and that's $1 million premium, well, maybe that's $120,000 commission.
It's not a huge book.
Yeah, there's an emotional attachment to these big numbers that it sounds very successful, but in reality, no. Always talk in revenue, and that way the producer can connect themselves to the revenue that they're generating to what they're costing. It's a one-to-one relationship. Mm-hmm. You can't say, "Oh, I'm bringing in $1 million, and then I'm only getting paid, $70,000." No, you speak in the same terms: revenue to real paid roll dollars.
Mm-hmm. And I will say doing this work also has a positive impact. Yes, you get to cut the cord with potential producers that maybe aren't in the right seat. But the other key piece to this is if you are setting your annual targets, you're creating business plans, you're creating the profiles, you're also incentivizing all of your A players and your great players. The right producer profile wants a sales target. They're driven. They're going to appreciate having that direct conversation. They're going to appreciate a plan, and they're going to appreciate being on the same page as you as they start to grow their book. They probably have larger goals than you do potentially for themselves. So having those open, honest dialogues and giving them the tools, they also know where to improve and where maybe their strengths are in sales. So there's also a whole other positive impact to having that hard conversation.
And there's a real danger, I want to bring out from the standpoint of what if we don't address? Well, obviously we're losing money every day, every payroll, but there's some other things that are happening within your agency when you have low performer or you allow a low performer to stay in your agency. And that is low performers lower the bar for everybody else,
including yourself. So what we've seen, and this is my final point that I really, really want to hone in on because it's been a reoccurring theme already this year, and that's the opportunity cost. When you have the wrong producer or the wrong employee in the wrong seat, how much time you spend with them is an opportunity cost of what you should be doing elsewhere. The time you should be spending encouraging, developing the right producer, the right employee for the right seat.
And are they taking away from time from your other team members because they require that time, or they're utilizing time of the team members because they need help?
That's a good one too.
So more than just dollars.
More than just dollars. Cut the cord, guys. Absolutely. It is for everyone's benefit, not just yours, your team's, and ultimately the producer or employee in question.
And your insurance.
Any final wrap up, Kay?
No, I think we nailed it. I think, at this point, like I said, there is a positive incentive to having the hard conversation and just consider your own opportunity cost. If you do make this decision, what's the opportunity cost to your agency? And I would almost guarantee it's probably a lot larger than the hurt that you're going to feel from having that hard conversation.
All right, pop quiz for the agency CFO team. How many of us have heard an agency owner partner tell us, I should have done it sooner?
All
This month or
Yeah, this week, this month, this year. All right, thank you everyone for joining. As always, please follow us on social media, subscribe to our podcast, our YouTube channel, reach out to us. We love talking to people, so please reach out to us, and thank you so much for listening.
And we wish you wonderful financial health.